Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe, Kyle, and Ray. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast will contain detailed spoilers. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show. And welcome back, one and all, to Reviews Without Remorse. I am your good buddy, Joe Darlington. How are you doing after a long hiatus? I have emerged from the crypt, dusted off Reviews Without Remorse, and here we are. It's taking on a little bit of a different form. I will explain shortly, and I need to introduce my new crew, Kyle and Ray. What's up, guys?
How you doing, Joe?
Hello.
I am good. How are you guys doing?
Thanks for having us here.
Excellent.
Cool. So listen, before, like I said, different shows got a slightly different format. So I will introduce you guys, and then I'll talk about where my partner, who unfortunately will no longer be part of the show, where he is. But for now, Kyle, brother, talk to me. How's he doing? And tell me about you.
I'm doing well, and I have to tell you, I've been a huge fan of this podcast for a long time. And when you asked me to join, you made me the happiest girl in the world. So this is like getting the call up to the majors, and I appreciate you asking me to fill Dave's shoes.
Oh, thank you. Well,
thank
you for doing
one
it.
Of his shoes.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you being there, brother, honestly. And I felt like if there was anybody who I love sitting around talking about movies with, it's you. And you always have really good insight. So I know you're going to be a good part of the team. Ray, what's happening, partner?
Not a whole lot, man. I am very excited to be here.
Nice. And I know you and I have been talking movies for a long time, too. So this should be a lot of fun.
Oh, we absolutely have. I can't think of two other people that I'd rather have on my movie trivia team than you guys.
This is very true.
I feel like the only thing missing right now is beer since we're doing this remote, but that's okay. Kyle, tell me about what kind of movies, what are your tops that you really love?
Well, the whole reason we're here is we all are friends through the James Bond fan community. So
Absolutely.
The Bond film's very, very high on my movie ranking list. But it's funny how James Bond fans also like a lot of the same other things. We all kind of gravitate towards things like Star Trek and Superman and the character that we're going to discuss later on tonight. So I love all that kind of stuff. I love classic film noir, 1970s New Hollywood. I love Quentin Tarantino movies. Just an all-around friendly neighborhood cinephile.
Nice. Raymond, same question. I know a couple are obvious, but tell me, what are your top movies?
Oh, man, top movies is a rough one. I'm one of those guys that has to break it down by category, but number one would definitely be Ghostbusters. But if we're talking about movies in general and doing this podcast, I think there's a lot of great discussions to be had because I honestly, there's very few people that I can have an entire conversation with in just movie quotes. It's like you guys and my wife maybe, and one or two other friends. So.
Nice. I love it. Yeah. So, all right. So here we are. We're gonna kind of bring in this is sort of the new generation of Reviews Without Remorse. So maybe that's a possible name. Reviews Without Remorse, the next generation.
Beta testing or 2.0.
Any ideas for names that we can call this thing? I had a couple. I don't know about you guys. I was thinking the first one that comes to my mind is Reviews Without Remorse 2, Electric Boogaloo.
That's the classic, but I'm going to go with Reviews Without Remorse 2, Reviews Harder.
Nice.
Ooh, that's a good one. Revenge of the Nerds.
There you go. Bride of Reviews Without Remorse. I think one that's obvious would be sort of Reviews Without Remorse, the new batch.
Reviews Strikes Back.
Where you just do Reviews Without Remorse, Judgment Day.
There you go.
Oh, Judgment Day.
All right, so listen, like I said, I would be very remiss if I did not acknowledge my good friend Dave. I was very sad that he will not be able to do Reviews Without Remorse anymore. We both got busy around the same times, but for a long time, I was really kind of holding out hope that, things might fall back into place. But funny thing about Dave. So I should say this. Dave and I have been friends for 30 years, over 30 years, and I can't even believe it myself. So we are and have always been really good friends. So I would say, so things started to get, once the pandemic was over, we got slammed. It was kind of the polar opposite of what it was like when we were all in the lockdowns. All of a sudden we had no time at all. So we both had to stop doing Reviews Without Remorse. And, it sucked, but we both knew, what are you going to do? So, but over time, I kept sort of hoping, that things would sort of clear up when we would get back to it. And, even Ray, when a couple times you asked me like, hey, are you ever thinking about doing this? Do you want to maybe do it with a new team, etc.? And I was like, well, let me just wait and see what Dave is doing, because I would feel pretty bad if I did that without him. So anyway, over this past summer, he started to get a little quiet, and I started to notice I wasn't hearing from him nearly as often. He kind of said at some point, I'm kind of in the middle of stuff, got some things going on, personal things, and and he said I might not be as whatever. But little by little, I would send a text, I wouldn't hear anything back, and send another text a week or two later, hey dude, thinking about you, hope you're doing okay. And I really started to get kind of nervous, like something was wrong. So anyway, so finally I sent a text, and how the blue on the iPhone, sometimes when it turns green, somebody doesn't have their phone or something's up. And I was like, all right, now I really started to get worried. So I reached out to a mutual friend who I hadn't talked to in ages and said, hey, do you know where Dave is? What's going on with him? And she said, yeah, I do, but I'm not really at liberty to talk about it. And I was like, oh, brother. And I'm really starting to get nervous. So, and I was going to reach out to his wife, but thankfully, before I had a chance, my phone rings and there's Dave. And the weight just came off my shoulders. He said, dude, listen, I'm fine. I'm good. And I said, dude, I thought you were ghosting me for a little while there. And he said to me, don't be crazy. We've been friends for 30 years. I wouldn't do that. And he basically just said, listen, I have a lot going on. I'm going to be off the radar for a while. And, he didn't really get into the details, and I didn't pry. He did say that it was kind of personal, and, I understood. I totally understood, because that's what, again, I've known him for years. This is how friends are. And sometimes, you have to do your own thing. And I respect that. And I just had to really hand it to him. I said, Dave, you handled this right. You talked to me man to man, and I appreciate that. And at one point, Dave even said something. It almost sounded like Spock in Star Trek 2. Something to the effect of, we always have and always will be friends. And I almost got choked up, and I just want to say to Dave, you're a stand-up guy. You're a class act. You really know how to handle things right. And again, you treated our friendship with the respect it deserves. It means a lot to me that you handled it the right way. So cheers to my good friend, Dave.
Cheers, Dave.
To Dave.
Cheers, buddy.
I miss the desert. I miss the sea. And I miss waking up every morning, wondering what wonderful adventure the new day will bring to us.
Those days have come and gone.
Perhaps not.
Daredevil archaeologist Indiana Jones races against time to retrieve a legendary dial that can change the course of history. Written by Jez Butterworth, John Henry Butterworth, David Coep, and James Mangold, based on characters created by George Lucas and Philip Kaufman, directed by James Mangold, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Well, aren't you so glad you came back from your hiatus on such a clunker?
I'm excited to be doing Reviews Without Remorse again, but I'm so mad at you guys that you made me watch this piece of crap again.
It could be worse. We could be watching Crystal Skulls.
Well, that's kind of the $1 million question. I don't know if it's better or worse, but we'll talk about it. Who wants to go first with some preliminary thoughts?
Kyle, kick things off, man.
All right, I'll jump in.
Set the tone.
So, being a James Bond fan, as we kind of discussed earlier, Also a huge Indiana Jones fan, and those two things kind of go hand in hand. And in fact, I was an Indiana Jones fan first, and always loved anything connected with that character. So when this movie was announced, I was excited for it, as I think we all were. Went and saw it in the theater, and that was it. I watched it that one time and never felt pulled to watch it again until we decided to watch it last week. So that tells me something right off the bat, that there was no burning urge to ever see this a second time. What I did do the first time I saw it, I went home and immediately put on Raiders of the Lost Ark just because I wanted to stay in that world a little bit more. But
Get hyped up for it.
It wasn't like, oh, I got to see that again next weekend. I loved it so much. And I still feel that way. If I don't see this again, I'd be fine.
Raymond, what do you got for me?
I can agree with Kyle. Unfortunately, I have kids, so it's hard for me and the wife to get out to the theater to see a movie when it first comes out. So we waited till it was released. At least I thought that, or at least she thought that. Because when I told her that we were doing this podcast, I was like, I gotta sit down and watch Dial of Destiny. She's like, we already watched it. I'm like, we did? I had no recollection of the movie at all. So I rewatched it just for the podcast, and I didn't think it was terrible. It was certainly not top 3, but it was, in my opinion, not as bad as Crystal Skulls. There were things I liked about it, obviously, things I didn't. A lot of that as well, but it's not on the caliber of Raiders or Crusades or even Temple.
Guys, I admire the diplomacy in talking about this movie. Yeah. So, and it's funny, you went right to seeing it in the theater or not seeing it in the theater. This was the first Indiana Jones that I didn't bother to see in the theater. And honestly, I felt like I was probably so burned by Crystal Skull that it almost just didn't even occur to me to get excited about this one. So, yeah. So this movie to me is, I'll just say it's definitely a sign of the times. And I feel like all of the same problems that are plaguing most movies these days, boy, does it hit this one hard. Kyle, you said something recently that stayed with me, and you said something, we were talking about Star Wars or something, and you said something like, if I could go back and tell my teenage self that, my 12-year-old self, that one day you'll be so bored with Star Wars that a new thing will come out and you will just skip it, you wouldn't have believed it. But same thing for me in Indiana Jones. I mean, when I can remember when Crystal Skull came out, I mean, I was still sort of naive at that point. And if you want to talk about my feeling about Crystal Skull, just watch the South Park episode.
They're raping him! I can't watch. Let's get out of here, Kyle. Why would Spielberg and Lucas do this? Come on, let's go. Why are they doing this? Just run!
That's honestly how I felt. I'm sitting here in the theater going, are you ready for another adventure? I sure am, Indy.
Well, I thought it was pretty good.
I thought it was pretty good.
All right, Butters. So I really didn't expect much from this one, but honestly, it was probably exactly what I would have expected, and that ain't much. So we can get into the nitty-gritty of specifics of it. I think it does have, I think ironically, I think there's a good movie in here somewhere that kind of wanted to be made, but it was so bogged down in these other things I just could not stop looking at. And honestly, I'll say this too before I shut up for a second. I kind of have been feeling for a while that there is kind of room to make stories about aging heroes, but they're very tricky. You have to kind of get them exactly right, and this one I felt like did everything wrong in that respect.
I could totally see that. Yeah, I'll agree with you that what you were saying about Crystal Skulls, how you were excited, finally you're going to get a 4th movie, let's go, and it just being a complete disappointment, because I completely agree. So I wasn't really expecting much from this movie when I finally sat down to watch it a second time, apparently. But I was kind of surprised. Like if I compared it, if I were to put them in order, it would be Raiders, Crusade, Temple, Dial, Skulls. Skulls was I just can't get past Shia LaBeouf Tarzaning with
Yeah.
chimpanzees through the jungle. I'm sorry, but that was as ridiculous as like some of the things in the movies are. That just like took it over the top. It wasn't terrible. I mean, it's not great. It's not of the caliber of the original trilogy, but it was better, I would say.
Well, that is one of the positives of this film. One thing they got right over the last one is
Was no
they
Shia LaBeouf.
got rid of Shia LaBeouf. Which actually brings in, I think, one of the best acting scenes that Harrison Ford gives in the movie when he finally explains what happened to his son. That's a good acting moment for Ford. And he explains how his son was killed in Vietnam and it destroyed his marriage. That's a little bit more depth than we're used to seeing from the Indiana Jones character.
True. Spoilers, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet and you were watching this or listening to this before you watched the movie.
all these reviews are going to be spoilerific. I kind of agree with you. I think it was a good display by Harrison Ford, some genuine acting. But one of the things I noticed in this movie is that, like, at first it rubs you funny because Indiana Jones is a grumpy old man. Like,
yes.
Like they literally had to, he's literally banging on the door of the neighbors.
Get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
Honestly, like, I mean, you could not have been more on the nose with that. He's banging on the doors. The music is too loud, like, holy cow. All right. Well, but I kind of felt like it went a step further in that it's not just about him being grumpy, but he was kind of just always miserable. I felt like he was constantly sucking the fun out of the room. Like, she says, "Hey, what would you do if you can go back in time?" "I'd go back in time and rescue my son who's dead and save my marriage that's failed and all this." And I'm like, all right, okay. And then, then later they escape from the ship, from the bad guys, and she's like, "Yay, we did it." And he goes, "My friend is dead, you jerk."
Well, we do talk about how sometimes, and we mentioned this just before, Hollywood learns the wrong lessons, and they turned Luke Skywalker into a cranky old man. And for some reason, I guess they decided to double down and do the same thing with Indiana Jones. And I just don't see that character living out his life that way. This is a man who dedicated his entire existence to adventure and to the pursuit of history and knowledge. And now he's just banging on about how the music is too loud.
Yeah, that's very much a part of it, I think. In fact, I think I want to say that I see Kathleen Kennedy's fingerprints all over this, because I feel like the same. There seemed to be a strategy with Star Wars that said, we're going to kind of get rid of these old, cranky, old, grumpy characters and fill that spot with the spunky new generation. So hopefully the younger kids will sort of forget about the old guys and kind of latch on to these new characters. And I felt like they sort of played the same thing here, where Indiana Jones is old and cranky. I mean, there's literally sometimes where he's doddering around, like there's points where he's hobbling like Joe Biden, and I'm like, like,
when he's climbing up the mountain complaining about his legs and back. And
I was shocked that they even, like, honestly, yeah, that was so on the nose too. I mean, when they got to that point, he's like, "I got a bad shoulder and a bad back, and I got a plate in my leg," and so I'm like, holy smokes! I mean, like, stop with that already. Yeah, so I felt like they seemed to be trying to bring in this spry young girl who's going to take over. I mean, there were scenes of her jumping on the next car, punching the bad guys, trying totally out Indiana Jonesing Indiana Jones, and I'm like, again, I see what you're trying to do, I think, but yeah, it's not working.
I would even argue that they do that with the wrong character. I think if they were to do that, the interesting character would have been the female CIA agent that's introduced earlier in the film and then killed off. Without ceremony. Maybe make her the new action hero who comes in when you least expect it. Maybe she's off screen for a while and then comes in and saves Indy and Wombat and the
Yeah.
kid whose name I can't remember.
Oh, her short round.
Yes,
right.
Terry,
short
Terry.
round 2.0.
Short round, exactly.
Well, and that's what I was thinking too. Like, they're the same character. It's I'm reading Sherlock Holmes to my kids right now, so it's like Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. Like, they're both intelligent, they're both capable, they have the same, they're in the same field and everything, but they're polar opposites. Like, Indy wants to discover things, rescue these relics for museums, and then you got Helena that's trying to make money off it. She's like the evil version of Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock had Short Round, and she has this guy Terry, or I think it's Teddy or Terry.
Teddy,
What
that's it.
Teddy,
Yeah,
Teddy. But they're essentially the same character except polar opposites, male and female, good versus or good and bad. And I mean, how many times is she going to screw him over throughout this film until he's finally like, "Screw you, I'm not doing this anymore," and just
Yeah.
goes about his business. It's always one more try, like second chance after second chance after second chance, and that's what was getting to me. That was really annoying about it.
Well, her motivation throughout the movie is very unclear, and it is shifting. Sometimes it seems like it's money. Sometimes it seems like she's just trying to stay one step ahead of her ex-fiance. I'm not really sure what is spurring her on. Does she want the glory of being the next Indiana Jones, or is she just trying to like make a quick buck?
Or
that
follow
kind
her
of
father's legacy.
it shifts throughout the film.
Yeah.
What is her motivation?
It does. Right. I agree with you. It did seem very silly. They kept focusing on the idea like I'm all about the money. Cash is everything is cash, and at some point it's like, lady, go be a stockbroker. I'm sure
Right.
there's easier ways to hustle a buck, than to find this really, really obscure thing that no one in the world knows what it is. So who's going to pay you how much for this?
And then they throw in the whole thing about like it's her father's legacy, studying this thing the same way that Indy's father was, doing the Holy Grail. There was his Holy Grail. So are you trying to make money off it? Are you trying to be the good person? Like every act of it, she had a different excuse for what she was doing. But no matter what, she was still screwing over Indy, and he's still like, "Oh, she almost killed me. I'll help her again."
Right. You would think that they would have at least sort of painted her initially. You think she's doing this solely to make money, but then as time goes on, you see this is a little more of a passion project because of her father. But they really don't do that. And that was kind of that was sort of like a layup to me. Like why'd you miss that? And incidentally, you're reminding me too, him constantly forgiving her and she keeps screwing him over. I remember the same thing happened in the last movie when he had that guy Mac, who every time he was a double agent, then he was a triple agent, he's screwing him over, then they're friends again. It was like, guys, like, what are you doing? Professional wrestling doesn't have the shifts to the good guys and bad guys as fast and furious as this.
Well, that kind of brings up the issue that I have with this movie writ large is it doesn't know what story it wants to tell. What is the plot? Is it a revival of the Third Reich? Is it dealing with aging? Is it passing the torch? I don't really know what story they're trying to tell, and I don't think they do either because it keeps changing throughout the film, and I'm not satisfied with what they've presented us. I don't think they've given us a cohesive beginning, middle, end. This is what we're trying to tell you. In the first one, it's a love story between Indy and Marion. It's clear, and a little bit of a rivalry between Indiana Jones and his evil opposite number in Belloc. Here, we don't really have a clear story. Why am I watching this? What is the plot?
I think as far as I mentioned earlier that I've felt for a while that there is a place for stories about aging heroes. The one that to me is probably the cream of the crop for me would be Rocky VI or Rocky Balboa.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? That is how you do a story about the redemption of somebody who was way past their prime. And I felt that they handled that perfectly because basically what I think made it sort of believable was that Rocky going against this younger kid who hasn't really had really hard fights, etc. He's got youth on his side. Rocky's old, But Rocky was the whole point was that they don't build them like they used to, you know. So it was like kind of the old tried and true versus the new whatever. But here they don't seem to want to do that. They seem very happy to basically embarrass Indiana Jones and make him look old and feeble and useless. I mean, they seem to be trying to walk the line a little bit, where he gets his time to shine sometimes, and then there's other times where he looks like a fool, you know. And but it's like I get the impression that they don't know how to do this, that they don't know what they want to say. Are they trying to throw him to the side, you know, and every once in a while they remind themselves to try to do it with a slight bit of dignity, and there's other times where they slap you in the face with the idea that he's old and decrepit and shouldn't be out of the old age home.
And you can tell that they set out to kill him in this movie. I think that was the original plan. They're really building towards the death of Indiana Jones, and I'm glad that they don't. I'm glad that they kept the character alive, and I'm wondering if that is because we as an audience kind of got tired of seeing our heroes get killed the last decade or so, whether it be Luke Skywalker, Tony Stark, or James Bond. Do we need to see another major hero of cinema get killed?
Yeah, the self-sacrifice thing has become a cliche at this point, and like that Hollywood just needs to go a new route.
Yeah, and this wasn't even. It wouldn't even have fallen under self-sacrifice. It was just like he was just kind of throwing in the towel. Really, they ended up in this place, and he's like, you know what? I just hate my life, and I'm just gonna stay here and just die here. So like I even self-sacrifice is kind of generous, you know, because it really wasn't like he wasn't like holding the door saying, "Go on, get out of here. I'll hold them back" or something or other. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't even that either. I mean, it almost kind of, I half wonder if this was the product of a focus group that they just let him live, you know. But watching, I mean, again, 2 films ago we saw Indiana Jones riding off into the sunset. Him and his crew riding off into the sunset. Here we see him in a stank kitchen in like Brooklyn or something. You know, like.
Well, hold on, because that was actually might have been my favorite part of this movie, is the throwback with him and Marion. I thought that was pretty awesome. I thought that was kind of cool.
I will throw in a little in that I thought it was slightly touching. I will give you that, and it was nice to see her. But again, I didn't feel that this was a dignified send off for either of these 2 characters.
No, I don't. No, not at all. But I just thought that particular scene. I was like, oh, they're doing the thing.
It's an emotional moment, and I'm glad it's there. As a fan of the characters and a fan of the series, I appreciate that too.
I don't believe in magic, but a few times in my life, I've seen things I can't explain. And I've come to believe it's not so much what you believe. How hard you believe it.
What do you guys think of the action in this movie?
It's okay. My problem with this movie, in as far as the action goes, the first 3, not so much the 4th, maybe a little bit, but the first 3, there is a real sense of place. I feel like I'm in the action, and there's a lot of local flavor, and it's gritty, for lack of a better word. Here in this movie, all of the action scenes seem very pastiche-y. It looks too clean. It looks too good. I enjoy the tuk-tuk chase. I think that's fun, but it's through a set or a location that looks too good. It doesn't look dirty. It doesn't look authentic.
And I think that has to do with one of the things that I'm really big on. I love practical effects. I'm not. I mean, if you do it right with CGI and things like that, sure. But I'd like to keep that to a minimum. I'm really big on practical effects. So when you got Indy fighting a Nazi on the wing of an airplane, that's awesome. When you're doing Tarzan chases, Tarzan swings through the jungle with that's ridiculous, and it doesn't look right. It doesn't look good. I like the action in this one to a degree. I actually thought that the de-aging effects that they did on Harrison Ford were pretty freaking awesome. That was really
I agree.
good. His eyes had like a little bit of a glint type thing. They were like, okay, but other than that, it looked really, really good. The action I thought was pretty cool. I thought the modern day scenes were, and I love action movies and violence, but I thought for an indie movie, those parts were too violent. With the assassination at the college where they're like shooting the secretary and the dean and all that. I'm like, that doesn't seem very indie. This seems like a different kind of movie than what I'd expect from an Indiana Jones movie. I still liked it, but I'm like, ooh, that's a little dark. Like if I take my kids to see indie, I mean, Kali Ma ripping out hearts out of people's chests. I'm sorry, okay, I get that, but I don't know. There was something about this one that just vibed a little different.
Well, it goes back to they don't know what kind of movie they want to make. Do they want to make a CIA conspiracy 3 Days of the Condor kind of movie, or are they trying to make an adventure spectacle? And I don't think they decided which one they wanted.
So they just put them all together.
Basically.
I got you. I like it.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that I totally got the same impression. The other violent scene I noticed was all the Nazis hanging off the side of the train, and they all got like machine gunned off. And then the opening scene. Yeah, I noticed that as well, and I kind of thought like this is a little heavy for an Indiana Jones movie. I thought the action was kind of annoying, and I was starting to say to myself as I was watching this that, do you guys remember the Red Letter Media breaking apart the prequels?
Very well.
Complaining, and complaining how all of these poor actors are standing in front of green screens the entire time, and the whole film just sort of ends up with this weird. I was watching this and I was saying, I think we've kind of gotten to where that's not even a complaint anymore. I think that like every movie now is just CGI and green screens. I felt like half of that chase, if not most of that tuk chase, I was thinking this looks very plastic to me. Like it looks very CGI-ish, people doing things in front of green screens, and they just like all of the places seemed kind of like they were put together in a computer, and I just kind of was getting this kind of very artificial vibe, and I kind of wasn't. It just wasn't doing anything for me because again, no one's gonna get hurt. I feel like when I watch Raiders and I see him going under the truck, somebody's getting hurt. Like that's a real thing that somebody's doing. This here, like there was even a shot in the opening sequence when they're on top of the train. He's fighting the big guy on top of the train, and they go into the tunnel, and he pushes Indiana Jones up like against the ceiling of the tunnel,
grinding him up there as the train goes up. Yeah,
right. Which was kind of had that sort of indie feel, like you would see that another. But here, I'm like, no, you get killed if you did that. Like you can't just rub somebody against a wall that's flying past you at least like 70 miles an hour. Like that wouldn't be a thing. Same as watching Lashif get knocked off the train. And it's like, dude, you'd be dead. You would be dead.
How does he survive? That's
right.
They never really explain.
Oh my God!
You would be decapitated if that happened.
Nor does Indy get medical attention after getting shot center mass right in the chest.
Right.
And he's walking around for the rest of the film bleeding out from a serious gunshot wound.
Like the whole time they're like, oh, we got to get him to a hospital. Oh, we got to do this. Meanwhile, wait a minute. Like
he wakes up with a sucking.
He's been bleeding
wound.
for how long now?
Right.
And when does he actually get medical attention? Like when she punches him out, takes him back forward in time, and then gets him back to Brooklyn. Like wait.
And he's had a sucking chest wound for like 2,000 years.
Right. Seriously.
Technically.
Nor does he ever clear his name. He's wanted for murder. And they never really wrap up that plot line either.
No.
That just kind of fades away.
Well, even that I thought was kind of a leap in the story. I remember thinking like he all of a sudden he was wanted for murder because why? Because you were somewhere nearby and somebody said your name while there was a murder in the like. Why
he called the police?
Right.
Correct.
I mean, I don't really see how that would be a thing, but I mean, I suppose if you've got like spies working against you or something or other, maybe okay, fine. But they that was really not clear.
But it goes back to they don't know what story they want to tell. is it Indy on the run from the law, or is it Indy
Right.
trying to get the thing before the Nazis get the thing?
Right, exactly. I mean, there was see that's and that really bothers me about storytelling in general these days. They really don't like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. There were the guys came. There's a meeting and they set up the story. The Nazis are after this thing. This thing is really powerful. It would be bad if they got that right here. It's like they're constantly talking gobbledygook. So I can't figure out who is going to do what, how, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it didn't really make a lot of logical sense.
I'm not very clear on how the MacGuffin works. Like I'm not sure how the time travel is supposed to happen. The fissures in time. I'm not even sure time travel belongs in an Indiana Jones movie.
I didn't think aliens belonged in an Indiana Jones movie.
I concur.
Exactly. Yeah.
As far as the artifacts that Indy's hunting for, where would Archimedes' wheel fall for you guys compared to the other 4 movies? I mean, Holy Grail, you got the Ark of the Covenant, Holy Grail,
then the rest.
The rest.
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I remember thinking that the Crystal Skull is going to look really silly in somebody's Indiana Jones collection if they have one, but this
the
one,
Crystal Head vodka is very good.
There you go. There's that. Guess it's
Shout out Dan Aykroyd.
That's right.
I mean, I didn't really understand how this thing supposedly worked. I mean,
same.
You know what I mean? Like they say, put the pieces together, it does a thing, and all right, oh fine. I don't. Yeah. Again, I didn't understand if it told them the direction where to go or something, and when to get there, and that's why they're in the plane to fly to.
The way I understood it, when you put it together, and you would dial in the coordinates of what time you would want to go, it would give you the directions like a compass, and that's where you wanted to go to find the fissure in time. And I paused there for a quick moment. There's an actual thing, if somebody wants to Google it, that I think that this is actually based off of, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. There's an old thing that was found in the ocean that's very similar to Archimedes' wheel in the movie. I think that's where they got the idea for Archimedes' wheel, was based off of this actual calculate. It's like the oldest computer found, but it was found in the ocean and it's rusty as shit.
The only result that's coming up is the Antikythera, which is the Archimedes wheel.
It was like found in a shipwreck, super old, oldest known computer.
Oldest known example of an analog computer, the Antikythera, which is this thing.
Okay, so that's what it's actually based off fact, if we wanted to put that in there somewhere.
I think all of the indie MacGuffins are. It's just where do they rank?
Score 1 for Dial of Destiny. They have one. It's based on a real artifact. Okay.
Right.
I'm retiring.
Well, in that case, what are we drinking?
Same for the goddaughter.
Dad told me you found something on a train during the war. A dial that could change the course of history.
Why are you chasing the thing that drove your father crazy?
One of the things I'm pretty guilty of doing these reviews is I tend to fall back on this phrase that tends to pop up on an awful lot, especially talking about sequels. But a lot of times these things feel like fan fiction, and there are moments in this that I think really do sort of feel very much like fan fiction. And one of the things I noticed starting right out of the gate, I liked the opening scene. I think a lot of people agree that the opening scene is probably maybe even the best part of the film, because it's got kind of that old indie vibe to it.
Absolutely.
One of the things I kept noticing was I feel like somebody thinks that Indiana Jones has a superpower, and the superpower is luck. And I feel like that's kind of how these things are sort of written, where kind of just all kinds of crazy things happens, but Indiana Jones always sort of gets lucky, and lands in exactly the right place, or just he's at the right place at the right time, and he gets away in the nick of time. Not so much about what he's doing, but because he's just so damn lucky all the time.
He even says something to that effect in Raiders, where he says, like, I don't know, I'm just making this up as I go along.
Right.
I don't think it's fair to just place that on Indy, though, but you could say that about a lot of our favorite film heroes. Right place, right time.
Kinda, but I mean, we'll put it this way. I don't think that I would have said that in the first 3 films. I mean, you're always going to get those scenes where he's in a fight and he goes right up to the edge of the cliff and he's like, whoa, and he catches himself, and something like that. And that's all fine. I kind of feel like, but this one really took it up a notch, where all kinds of craziness is happening. Like the Nazis hanging him at one point, like literally hanging him in the building, and then some sort of bomb.
I had a huge problem with that.
Some bomb comes in and like kills all the Nazis except him, and then also sort of somehow cuts his rope down or something or other. And I'm like, okay, well,
I thought that scene was really, really funny. I'm like, oh, okay, he's in that position, and then the bomb drops, and that's the comedy moment. You're like, oh no, and then it falls another floor, and falls another floor, and falls another floor, and then explodes, kills all the Nazis. You got Indy hanging by his neck, and he manages to tuck his fist on the rope just to give him a little bit of a gap. And I'm like, okay, he's going to wiggle out of it, and that's going to be the end of it. Awesome. That's a cool escape. But then he falls, and he swings, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, there's like lassoing above somebody's head with Indy on the end of it. I'm like, how is his neck not broken yet? Like, that was probably that was as ridiculous as, which is one of the funniest moments, and I thought probably my favorite part of Crystal Skulls was the whole bomb sequence where he hides in the lead refrigerator when the bomb goes off and goes flying miles away and lands, and then pops open, and it's dusted off and good to go. So I just thought it was that kind of humor. Like, okay, yeah, that's like the Indy thing now.
I'm with you there, and like I said, I feel like that's somebody writing Indiana Jones saying, "Yeah, that's sort of a trait, isn't it?" And then they kind of start to write him a little more caricature than character. You know what I'm saying? Like it starts to get a little too crazy for me, and I'm like, yeah. The problem too is it's compounded because you're already buying. The film at that moment is already asking you to swallow a lot because it's all CGI. Like this like that whole thing in the beginning is so CGI. I mean, like honestly, I thought it was working pretty well. By the time they got to the train was when I was starting to see all of a sudden his de-aging wasn't looking so great, and I kind of felt like a lot of that scene was looking like the Polar Express. Frankly, it was so CGI-ish. It was getting cartoony.
You really notice it when he eats. That's when I noticed the seams in the de-aging CGI. Like, this is starting to fall apart here.
Please get out of here.
Stop!
Sorry.
Helena!
Dr. Jones, get him.
I will say this though, if I'm going to, since I beat the crap out of this movie so much, one of the highlights I thought, or one of the strong things for me, I thought the casting was really good. And I'm not talking about Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and I wish she would stop destroying all of my franchises. but the ones I am thinking of, I thought Antonio Banderas was actually a pretty good addition to the Indiana Jones roster. I thought he fit pretty well.
I agree. Had him in my notes. He was a pleasant surprise.
But they don't do anything with him.
He's there. He's drunk, and that's it.
He gets killed off in his second scene, and I thought, agreeing with you guys, like, all right, this guy Antonio Banderas in an Indiana Jones movie, that's going to be great. And the way he's introduced, I think he's going to be the next Sala or the next Short Round. Each indie movie has that cool character, that ally who's a really colorful guy. And I thought, okay, Antonio Banderas is going to be that character. And he just wasn't. He's completely wasted. I could have watched him for the rest of the film tagging along on their adventure. He should have.
I would agree with that. I don't know why he doesn't, but yeah, it's again, the film doesn't have any room for him, frankly. So they give us that scene. Honestly, that whole scene with the underwater stuff was kind of starting to win me back for a little while, and then then suddenly it wasn't. And again, it was primarily because I'm watching a lot of CGI eels and stuff, and I was like, yeah, we're back to the cartoon world again. But yeah, no, I thought you were absolutely right. I mean, he was really good. I thought he was sort of an interesting. It was almost like he reminded me of a combination of Sala and Katanga, who was the captain of the ship. Who again I thought was sort of like an unsung. He's not in that film very long, but he was really good in that. Like you kind of liked him in the short amount of time you spent with him. I kind of felt like he was sort of both of those characters sort of rolled into one in this. And yeah, I thought he was a really good fit. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It does. He really, again, the film doesn't have time to visit. The few times that, and I'm almost shocked I'm going to say this, but the couple times that they do stop and just talk a little bit, I remember feeling like I was kind of enjoying it. Like the dialogue, as again, it's a lot of Star Trek-y, like they would say, like the worst Star Trek is when they're rattling off gobbledygook and stuff. And a lot of that was happening here, but I was kind of sort of enjoying the sort of slower moments. So again, I kind of feel like this movie is sort of its own worst enemy. Just let this thing breathe and just be a little more of a normal Indiana Jones movie. And not every moment of every minute has to be some sort of a hair-raising thing. Like there was plenty of downtime in Raiders that we just enjoyed it,
And enough with the bickering between the two leads. Unlike with Sean Connery and Indy, there's no charm to the bickering. It just comes off as childish and really irritating after a while.
Yeah, with Indy and his father, it came off as comedy. This just came off as like
uncomfortable.
Like,
yes.
Well, yeah, uncomfortable to say the least. But like, if I had to compare it to something, it's like the evil stepdad and his son. Like they're just constantly, just like one's trying to like beat the other, and the other's trying to escape, and then they, for whatever reason they forgive each other. But Joe, going back to what you said about the underwater scene, that was something I actually thought was like among the few that were in there, at least a fun little nod to the OG trilogy, was the eels. When they saw the water splash around, I was like, "What are those?" No, they're eels. They're kind of like snakes. Snakes.
Yeah.
We all like. I thought that was kind of fun. But then he goes down there, and they're looking for the other half. They move the box. They pull it out, and then again, as soon as he gets it out, and then all the eels come in there, and he's freaking out, and his hose is caught, and all that. What's Ellen to do? Fucks him up. Screws him over again and just bails on him. Like, how many times are you going to forgive this guy?
Right.
This girl? I can't stand that. That was my biggest pet peeve through the whole thing. I'm sorry. Like, what was it? Fool me once, shame on me. Shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, whatever Bush said. I don't know.
You can't fool me
You can't fool me again.
If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Get him. Hitler made mistakes, and with this, I will correct them all.
You stole it.
Then you stole it.
And then I stole it. It's called capitalism.
The note that I wrote down multiple times as I was watching this movie was, pick up the pace, pick up the pace. And then I started writing it out, pick up the pace. It just, the lulls here had no substance. It's not like the moments that you were talking about in Raiders where we have a quiet moment and it's there to build the characters. That's not here.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking the same thing. I mean, honestly, this movie really was a slog to get through. I honestly kept looking at the time saying, isn't this wrapping up yet? Like, we're not done yet? I felt the same way. Like, what? Everything seemed to take forever. And again, it's funny. I'm criticizing this movie because it's trying to be a nonstop romp and they don't want to stop and smell the roses at all. Yet somehow I'm looking at my watch going, guys, let's get on with this.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
Get on with it!
I think around the time that they were getting the planes plural, which was that was really getting convoluted too, by the way, because I couldn't figure out why. I mean, by the end of the film, you realize, oh yeah, they needed a second plane to get back because one of the plane crashes. But it's like, okay, but did you read the script that you knew that? Why is she getting into one plane and the kid is trying to hijack another plane? I didn't quite get it. You know what I mean?
Well, Joe, like you were saying, like not every scene has to be this hair-raising moment and all that. I still found myself like pausing it and looking at the screen going, oh my God, that was only like a half hour of the movie. Doing something,
Right.
coming back, hit play, pause again. Holy shit, there's still like an hour and a half left of this movie. Go do something.
Honestly, yeah.
Go to the bathroom. It was so long and drawn out. It just ruined whatever hair-raising suspense and action that they had if it's constant like that.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of dialogue, backstory. That's the kind of thing I like.
I mean, even the opening scene, there was a ton of talking. Like there was a ton of talking with the subtitles. Like they're explaining a ton of stuff, and I'm sitting there kind of going, like, I don't understand what you're talking about anyway. So can we just move on already?
Which is why, not to keep talking about how much better Raiders is, but there's no fat on that movie.
No.
Every scene has
Absolutely.
a purpose, and each scene builds upon what we've already learned as the viewer. Each thing has a purpose, and everything has a resolution.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't have that.
No.
I kind of feel like this is what Disney has been kind of like leading us towards. It's, can I say woke? Am I allowed to say woke during this?
Bring it on.
It is Reviews Without Remorse. I kind of feel like this was leading towards the whole woke steps that Disney was taking. They wanted to have a new, strong female character that would possibly replace Indiana Jones. It's the same way they did us kind of dirty with No Time to Die and James Bond. They were trying to introduce a new, strong character, a female character, with the 00 moniker. But I think they were kind of playing it a little diplomatically, keeping him kind of there, but they were making her stronger, but she wasn't exactly the good person. She eventually came around and was like kind of a hero of the story, but they always showed the male as weak. Like, Hollywood doesn't need to reimagine old characters as weak men to introduce a new female lead. Like, I love my second favorite movie ever. First is Ghostbusters. Second is Aliens. Ripley is like the epitome of strong female leads. So how about a new property? You can make like a Indiana Jones' daughter or whatever. Maybe like what was his name? Muff, his son.
Mutt.
Mutt. There you go. Miff, Muff, Mutt. Mutt had an illegitimate Vietnamese kid while he was over in the war before he died, and now she's going to take over the mantle as a female Indiana Jones. Give me the Vietnamese illegitimate daughter of Mutt as a new Indy and its own thing. Like, do something like that. Stop taking old characters and trashing them, making them look shitty to raise up.
Well, this franchise already had a strong female lead. Her name was Marion Ravenwood.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely true.
We don't have to look that much far beyond the Indiana Jones series to find a strong female character. She's already there.
Right, but that brings me to the thing that I want to ask you guys. The last movie, Crystal Skulls, we had the tease of passing the torch. Mutt's about to put the hat on, Indy snatches it back. This one, we have hanging up in retirement, and then the hand comes out and whips it back through the window. So if there's going to be a passing of the torch, should there be a passing of the torch? Or if there is going to be a passing of the torch, how would you like to see that play out?
I'll tell you how I would like to see it. I would like to see maybe one of Indiana Jones's students say, like, I'm going to one-up my mentor. I'm going to be even greater. I'm going to be the greatest adventuring archaeologist who's ever lived, even better than that Indiana Jones hack. And then somewhere in Act 2, our protagonist gets into trouble and old man Dr. Jones comes out of the woodwork and says, not so fast, kid, and has to impart some aged wisdom onto our protagonist, who's then able to find the thing before the bad guys find the thing.
I like that. That sounds kind of familiar, though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
If you know,
it's an
you know.
interesting question. Do I want to see the torch get passed, or do I want to see maybe the series just fade away for a little while, and maybe like a couple of years down the line, maybe it gets like rebooted somehow and somebody else is doing it, because you know what'll happen eventually. So it's a matter of how. It's a good question. I don't know which I would prefer, honestly, because I mean, we're already in the 60s. So I kind of wonder, like, if they were genuinely going to try to pass the torch, and please don't pass it to Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I will not be seeing that movie.
No.
You know, so I don't know how you pass it at this point. I think maybe the opportunity was sort of passed, but
But passing the torch, yeah, is that something you'd want to see, or just leave it as him and maybe like a spin-off, maybe a young Indiana Jones, like reboot that?
I wouldn't mind that. You know, the irony for Indiana Jones for me has always been when Raiders first came out. I think it was before we even had a Temple of Doom. They were already starting to do, like, there was already a Marvel comic of Indiana Jones, and it was actually pretty good. I wasn't like a super regular reader, but the ones that I read, I thought were pretty decent because they weren't shooting for the moon. You know, I kind of felt like the original Raiders was something that could have been done every 2 or 3 years. Just do another one where Indiana Jones is off fighting, doing another thing, and running into different problems and adventures and things. I think they shot way too high. It was like, how are we going to go crazier than the last one? It was almost like by the time they got to the Holy Grail, I was like, see, that to me is like they have to shoot for the moon at this point. They don't know how to just kind of shoot for a double. You know, I would have loved a series where they just knocked one of these out every 2 years and it was just a double or a triple. It doesn't have to be a grand slam every time. It doesn't have to be the thing that's gonna, the Nazis are gonna take over the whole world if they get this or something or other. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, again, I thought this was a character that was really rich in the things you could have done, and it's kind of a shame that they only did like 3 originally, and then like 2 of these dogs that came out like decades later.
Well, there was the Young Indiana Jones TV series in the 90s, which I loved growing up. I ate that up with a spoon. It was really good.
Nice.
Same.
Better than the last 2 films.
I could totally see that being like a series or a series of movies, even if you're going to bring it back, if you want it to be in theaters, where you have a different adventure where you're not, like you said, like reaching for the moon each time, but just like a search for a different relic, as a from what happens from the cross that he finds leading up to the first movie and everything, just the little adventures in between, showing him growing up, maturing, and becoming who he is. The leading up to or after the cross of Coronado.
This way!
Fasten your seatbelts. There might be some turbulence.
You've taken your chances, made your mistakes, and now a final triumph.
Give him hell, Indiana Jones!
All right, guys, who's gonna go first with their score?
How are we scoring this?
1 to 10. Yeah, just give me a score from 1 to 10.
Oof. Okay, if I'm giving the Dial of Destiny a score of 1 to 10, I would give it a 4.75. I want to stay. I'm trying so hard because it's indie, and it wasn't terrible, but it was nowhere near the caliber of the first 3 films. I enjoyed it a bit. There were things that irked me, sure. Definitely give that the watch over Crystal Skulls.
All right. Well, you're right on line with where I was going to score it. I was going to score it a 5 for pretty much the same reason. It's still watching an Indiana Jones movie. I love the character. If you're a fan of the character, watch it once. The prologue is worth seeing, but I really have no desire to ever see this again. So I can't give it more than a halfway score.
I'm gonna be a little more harsh. The way I tend to score these is I figure if it's a good movie that's worth seeing is a 5 or above. A bad movie that I wouldn't recommend would be 4 and below. I would not. I mean, I didn't go to see this in the theater because I really was not interested. And when I finally saw it, I realized I made the right choice. I'm actually going to give this, and I usually don't do the 2.5s and 3. I'm actually going to give it a 2.5 because I part of me wants to give it a 1. Part of me says 2. I'll say 2.5, and I think it's only I'm being generous because I feel that there are, like I said earlier, I said there is a good movie in here somewhere. And I feel like there was somebody somewhere wanted to deliver a fun Indiana Jones romp. So there is glimmers of that. And by the way, Raiders to me would be a 10.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of feel like maybe it's standing in a very tall shadow as well, which is one of the reasons why I'm a little harsh. But yeah, I don't find a lot of redeeming things about the film. I would not watch that. I mean, like I said, if I never saw it at all, I think the only reason I even saw it was basically out of curiosity. And now again, because we're talking about it. But yeah, not something I would seek out in any shape or form.
You're a bastard, dude. If I knew, I mean, it is Reviews Without Remorse. We should have known better.
That's right. We don't pull punches here. All right, but who asked you guys? Give me the worst part for you. Or I think we used to say if there was something in here that you wish you could have taken the reins and done it differently, what would that have been?
Well, for me, it's the plot. I went over it a couple of times. This movie doesn't know what story it wants to tell, and I think it needed one more pass through the writer's room to decide whether it was going to be CIA conspiracy, Operation Paperclip, Resurgent Third Reich, or chasing the thing before the bad guys get the thing. I think the plot is my Who Asked Me.
I think mine would have to be the character Helena in general and her relationship with Indy. It just made no sense at all. I mean, if I took a chick on a date and she didn't show up the first time or tried to kill me the second time, third time, I'm done. I'm sorry. I would have been Indiana Jones, get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn.
I would not give that many second chances. I understand it's your friend and all that, plot-wise, and that just didn't make sense to me. And it's just an unforgivable script mistake.
I will. I said all along that it really bothered me the fact that there were some serious. There were times when they are really just embarrassing Indiana Jones for being too old. He has to be subjugated so she can look like hot shit, all that good stuff. The moment that I thought was unforgivable was when she finally punched him out at the end. I'm like, no. I mean, come on, you can't. I mean,
just another time she screwed him over. He gave honest to God, gave her my dying wish is to stay here, and she said no, and punched him and took him back to the current time. Makes no sense.
Right, and again, it's supposed to be an arc for her that she's doing something caring for him, even though she's so uncaring in general. But the indignities were just piled on throughout this movie, and I thought that one took the cake. So I got to go with that.
300-pound Nazi mechanics couldn't lay out Indiana Jones with one punch.
Thank you.
But 110-pound professor's daughter can.
Seriously. But for your consideration, gentlemen, what do you got, Kyle?
I'm going with John Williams. He turned in an all-timer of a score, and there are several little moments that reference the scores of the 3 classic Indiana Jones movies. There's a little bit of Temple of Doom. There's a lot of Raiders. There's a little bit of Last Crusade in there. And if you're a fan of the series, you'll pick up on those little musical motifs. So John Williams, A+.
I'm going to go with the nostalgia factor for me. Seeing Sala again, Marion, the little throwbacks that they had throughout the movie to the original trilogy, those kind of brought it back. And every time I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, wait, they did that. Okay, that makes it a little bit better. That was my feeling throughout most of the movie.
I'm going to give it to the casting. I thought, like I mentioned earlier, I thought the casting was pretty spot on. I thought Toby Jones felt very natural in that opening sequence. I thought Antonio Banderas was a nice addition. I thought he worked really well. And like you said, John Rhys Davies, Karen Allen bringing these classics back. just felt good. It was nice to see them again. Ironically, I feel the opposite about the leads. I didn't care for Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I didn't care for her character. Same for the young kid. Honestly, I kind of thought he was didn't quite work for me. And again, it was frustrating because he's obviously meant to be kind of a short roundish character, but again, don't remind me of a much better character. So those things worked pretty well.
How about Mads Mikkelsen?
Yes, very good. Boy, he really does lend some gravitas to the franchises that he's been in so far. I mean, he's been in Star Wars now. He's been in James Bond, obviously. I think he's pretty dynamite in kind of everything he's been in. He's been in a Marvel film. He's really good. So I think he's kind of an A+ every time you get him in something.
Oh, he was menacing and cold throughout the entire film, and that's what I really liked about his character, especially with the maitre d' at the hotel. He says something like, just because you won the war doesn't mean," or oh god, I can't think of it.
He said, like, "You didn't win the war. Hitler lost.
We lost the war." Yes,
Hitler lost it. Like, yeah, it was really. I thought that was very good. I agree with you.
I've been tortured with voodoo. Been shot 9 times. Including once by your father.
Sorry!
But I've been looking for this all my life.
Well, gentlemen, I think we have just reviewed our first film.
How about that?
Hot diggity.
Making up for lost time.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Too long. So yeah, we will definitely be back. We've got a couple of things that we've got on the burner. We're talking about which movies we want to tackle next, and it's kind of fun because we're at a good time because we know in the last few years since we did a Reviews Without Remorse, there's been a lot of interesting things that came out that we didn't touch on, so they are ripe for the picking.
Can't wait to tackle some of them.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much, Kyle, Ray. Thank you again for joining the team and helping to bring back Reviews Without Remorse.
Absolutely.
Pleasure to be here. See you next time.
See you.
Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe, Kyle, and Ray. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode. You can also find our episodes on our YouTube channel. Check the link in the description. All clips in this podcast are for commentary and critique and are considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
And assist Indiana Jones on his next adventure.
Okay, nice and slow, Dr. Jones.
More alcohol and pot.
Yeah, let's get you out of the tub first, Dr. Jones.
I want to fly an old plane.
I'm not sure that's a great idea.
Not a new safe one.
Yeah, I got that.
Ah! There's a skeleton in my bedroom!
That's your wife, Dr. Jones. Now, maybe today we don't do the earring?
No! Earring every day!